Hello, everybody. My name is Phil Lanier, and I'm president of Coaching Ourselves. And I want to thank you all for joining this Fireside chat today. We're very proud to be able to bring you this Fireside chat with Bev Patwell and Mark Porter. The Fireside chat will last approximately 45 minutes, followed by Q&A. Following this Fireside chat, everyone will receive a link to the recording, and I encourage you to share this with your colleagues who couldn't join us today. This event is hosted by Coaching Ourselves. We offer organizations a peer coaching approach to leadership and organizational development. We offer modules, essentially sophisticated discussion guides for peer coaching sessions. Our catalog has over 90 themes to spark meaningful discussion and real human connections where managers can share experiences and learn from each other. During this period of COVID-19, Coaching Ourselves is offering free open enrollment Coaching Ourselves sessions. This is an opportunity to try Coaching Ourselves. It's a great experience. You'll meet and really get to know other HR, L&D, and OD practitioners from around the world, learn how they're feeling and dealing with the challenges of keeping their people connected and business moving forward. You can visit coachingourselves.com to register and try a free Coaching Ourselves session. So today, our host is Mark Porter. We're very happy to have Mark join us today to talk with Bev about leading meaningful change. Mark is Executive Vice President of People and Culture for WestJet. Previously, he worked at Bombardier as an aircraft engineer before transitioning to a role in human resources. Mark's career has included work at other great Canadian companies. As Chief People Officer at Molson Canada, he played a key role in the Molson Coors merger, and he spent almost a decade as Senior Vice President of Human Resources with Shaw Communications. While he has many high-level professional accomplishments, which gives credit to the people surrounding him, Mark is proud to sit on the volunteer board for STARS Ambulance. STARS offers time, hope, and life-saving transport to critically ill and injured patients. In 2016-2017, STARS flew over 3,000 missions, carrying critically ill or injured patients. So I will now ask Mark and Bev to join us, and then I will turn it over to Mark.
Thanks very much, and thanks for the nice introduction, and good morning or good afternoon, everyone. And we live in, as the much used word, unprecedented times, and just want to thank everybody for taking the time. And we have lots of people who have from very different walks of life on this Fireside chat today. A number of people asked me, with all the challenges that certainly we're having within WestJet, where unfortunately have now laid off over 75% of our people, why I would take the time to do this. For me, there's really three reasons. First of all, I believe this is real HR. This is where we can truly make a difference. And that for me is not just about making a difference in organizations, but also making a difference in people's lives. And through the right sort of approach to leading or managing change, I believe that we can make a difference right across the spectrum. And no more than now when we look at some of the challenges we face. And I'm sure it's very obvious to all of you on this Fireside chat, you can see the strong leaders, the people who have really come to the forefront in all of this, and also the ones who perhaps have not been up to the challenge. And it's certainly not missed on myself and others, both internally and externally, as how we do that. And then the final reason for me is that there are lots of different concepts and theories out there when we look at leading and managing change. And over my many years in the career, this has been, I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly, I'm afraid, as we look through this. What I've found with the work that Bev has been able to do, as I mentioned in the write-up for the book, is the most practical, the most easily understood, and the ones that we can absolutely use. And I find that that is a key differentiator as we look through to that. Bev and I met a number of years ago now, quite a few, in fact, 20 years ago, when we both worked together in Montreal at Bombardier, and have really maintained a relationship ever since. Bev has been involved in each of the companies that I've certainly had the privilege of working for, and has led some very key development in change, right from the C-suite or the executive team, right through to frontline change gurus and change champions. So we've had lots of fun. We've had lots of challenges together as we go through that, and certainly very excited to be part of this and to really be part of the HR, the OD, the change leadership community. And as I mentioned at the start, this is our time. This is the time when we truly can make a difference in both organizations and particularly when people are going through challenging times as well. So maybe in terms of moving forward and on this, as part of our fireside chat, the plan is that I'll ask a few questions. Bev will probably ask me back the same question again, and we'll certainly have it as an informal around leading meaningful change. And I can start off by asking Bev a question really around use of self. And Bev, it's one of what I believe is the key differentiator for what your work and what you have certainly been teaching and supporting and coaching teams over the last 20 years that I've known you, is the whole concept of use of self. And I really would love to just for you to talk a little bit about, firstly, why you think it's so important and why it's so fundamental to successful change.
Great. Thanks a lot, Mark. I'm really glad that we're doing this fireside chat together because we've worked alongside each other, and I always have fun working with you. That's true. But we both share the passion around use of self, and I think this is really a fundamental difference in a change process. We often train people, and then we go on and we develop the tactics to the plan, and then we work the plan. And we forget that people are part of the plan, even in how we design our process to develop the plan. So, and nobody today in any organizational change that crosses over the organization or today in this pandemic has all the answers. So we need to develop people, I believe, in real time to have the skills that they need that are essential and critical as they're going through the process. So developing leaders with their teams and developing the organization all the way through, I believe, is really key. And use of self is our most important instrument in our toolkit, and it's the only one we control. So use of self to me is more than just self-awareness. It's around paying attention to the way we think and the way we behave and our actions and the impact that we have on others. And those others are the people we're leading, working with, and serving in our organization. And in this pandemic, it's even how we are showing up as leaders and the way we're thinking and behaving in our actual families and communities. So use the self, I believe, is a really key piece. It's fundamental. If we don't get this right, if we don't help people to be their best selves in our organization, we're not going to be as successful as we would be with our visions and our plans. So if I could just go to slide 4 for a minute, Phil. I've been, as you said, working with the concepts of use of self throughout my career, and recently I was asked to do an article for the International OD Journal, which is written up in the book. But basically, I interviewed people from across the lifespan, from the Generation Zs in university to people who are retired, to see how they described use of self, and this is the image they came up with. Well, this is the image I came up with based on what they described. So for those of you in the audience, I just want you to take a minute and just think about, what do you see in this diagram? What does it resonate for you when you look at this image? And what I heard from people was that use of self is a lifelong process. It's something that we have to attend to throughout our life, and in our private life and in our work life, and how we show up in the community. So this image is a depiction of the affinity diagram. So it shows process, movement, something that flows and ebbs and weaves into our life. The other piece is that this is also, could be eyeglasses, it could be your eyes, and this is what we use to see ourselves, and this is what we also use to see others. And lastly, I've heard people describe use of self as something that blocks them. It's kind of like handcuffs that restrains them from being their best self. So sometimes we have to pay attention to that. What do we need to overcome in terms of our lens? What do we need to face in terms of our values and the way that we're reacting? So these are some of the key pieces, but the key elements of use of self is that we need to be constantly attending to being self-aware and understanding our impact, and that it is a process. So if I ground this in our COVID experience right now, the world has gone through a major process. This is our common ground right now that we can all relate to, and we've all had to go through the process of really thinking about how we want to show up through this crisis in our homes, in our families, and in our communities, and now even working from home. How are we managing that? And how do we want to show up? Do we want to lead? Do we want to follow? Do we want to react? And so on. So in this COVID crisis, we've had to learn a whole lot of new behaviors. We've had to learn a new language. We had to adapt our environment, wearing masks, physical distancing, social distancing, and so on. All of that involved us making a whole bunch of choices in how we were going to embrace this change and show up and adhere to the guidelines so that we can flatten the curve. So in essence, this is how use of self shows up. And once again, across children now, where we're trying to help them to make the right choice. Safe and healthy as well.
Just building on that, there's a number of things that, especially during this time of this crisis, and strengths and your own areas of limitation. And I think as of change, or whether it's just coping with this pandemic, is first of all understanding what you can bring to the table. During, I think we spend a lot of time on force divert more about making sure we have that diversity of thought, and I think that really helps as we go. I think the second thing is, and particularly during a crisis, there's a real danger, in particular, there is a danger to go in ourselves, and I joke with my wife, who's COVID-19 is the introvert's illness, because people are isolating a lot, and from our point of view, we need to make sure that we are reaching out even more. We whether it's as leaders or as individuals, making that effort, and whether it's through social media or whether it's through even written cards or something, to get through to and help people understand that they are valued and they are supported. So really just making sure that we're seeking feedback. And then the other one that we have found has been very helpful is, it sounds strange to say increasing the visibility of leadership, but really just making sure that we increase that visibility. It's great with the tools as this is, with Zoom or with Microsoft Teams or with FaceTime or any of those, is really for leaders to be even more visible. And I think that shows, because we then show what Bev showed in her slide, things like authenticity, things like people being open to chat with people, and a lot of times not know all the answers. And in some cases, as we have found, even having to unfortunately reverse decisions that maybe made a few weeks ago, because the environment is changing. But that ability to have flexibility, that ability to have that perseverance, and that ability to understand our people and to understand and to reach out, I think is critical, whether, as I say, it's a crisis like this, or even in a small change project, being able to understand where everybody's coming from and the help and support.
Yeah, and the other piece to build on what you're saying, Mark, I call this change leadership right now. You know, how do you really intentionally want to be as a leader? And yeah, it's scary for people. And if you're leading a team and leading a department in the organization, and you're fearful yourself, and you have a preference to be, you know, on your own to figure out all the solution, you may be blocking everybody from helping, supporting, and collaborating and building partnerships to move things along. So that's where your use of self and the choices you're making and how you're showing up can have a negative ripple effect. The other side is true. If you're reaching out and inspiring and encouraging and working together, then and towards that shared purpose, you can have a much more positive impact and leverage the diversity of thought, skills, knowledge, and abilities across your organization.
And just to finish up on the use of self, one of the things that certainly I've found has been very helpful as we do this is what I call having your own board of directors. And that's having that group of people who you know well, who you trust implicitly, and who can give you the feedback, and also you can share when the times are tougher, and you can share with them. And the reason I say it's a board of directors is it's not just one person, because we all have our unconscious or sometimes conscious biases. And it's important that we get that feedback from a variety of places and from a variety of people. And even more so now, that opportunity to seek that feedback on how am I doing, what's happening. I mean, I you know, find that is extremely helpful. Whether and that difference of opinion and feedback can be very useful as we move forward.
Right. I formed I called it the mastermind group. So I pulled together a group of really stellar OD colleagues and clients that I've been working with over the years together in the last month to do just that, because this is a big learning curve for all of us. And you know, it was my personal support system and professional support system, but we also helped each other. There's a give and take both ways. So it's a great example of how to build your own support system, which is
yeah. And for me, Bev, that's at all levels, in whether it's whether it's at whatever level we are in an organization, or even just at home, just being able to find the different support systems. And again, for me, it's the people that will give you feedback, and sometimes will give you the feedback that you don't want to hear, but you need to hear. And I think that's very helpful as we move through this. Rarely we see in change initiatives, whether it's change leadership, is it that the actual tool itself fails. Usually it's us as people that fail, and that's the challenge in all of this. And again, if this stuff were easy, Bev would have written the one book that would be a bestseller, and we would all now be appearing in the movie of the book. So it's not quite there. It's because it's different, and we all have different people and different personalities, and each challenge is slightly different. And while we can always refer back to what has happened in the past, it is also helpful to look forward to how we can really rebuild out of things like this pandemic as we go through. Interesting as we talk on that, Bev, and one of the chapters that I really appreciate most in your book is actually chapter 5, and I know you will say that's pretty consistent. I love the practical. I love the fact that there are models that we can follow in some shape or form. But chapter 3 actually looks at leading meaningful change, and it's actually the framework. And I'd love to hear a little bit of your story regarding the framework, what makes it unique, and how you think this is even applicable in something like dealing with the COVID-19 crisis.
That's great. I'm glad you like the framework. The framework, as you know, has evolved over 2 decades. I truly believe in it, and in the book there's lots of examples and case studies. There's one in particular for our Coaching Ourselves community who are on the call today that is about the Health and Human Services group led by Dr. Cynthia Smith at Camosun College here in Victoria, BC, and it describes how they used Coaching Ourselves as part of the Leading Meaningful Change framework to lead a significant change there. The framework, I've done a lot of courses all over the world on leading transformation and change. And as part of my program, I always ask people to do a change leadership assessment. It's a reflection of their challenge as they're leading the changes. And some of them do them in projects, and some of them do them as a process, and some come in as individuals and teams. But I've reviewed over 2,000 of them, and there's some very common themes that cross over all organizations, sectors, and geography. So that's how I emerged into this process, design the process. So Phil, if you can bring it up on slide 6. So it's the Leading Meaningful Change process has 4 stages. The first one is alignment. And alignment is often the most difficult piece to do in an organization. This is about creating, the cohesive leadership teams and task forces to be able to lead the change around a common purpose and a shared vision, and just defining the principles that are going to help you to guide the way you develop your plan, as well as how you develop and execute your plan. And I'm very serious when I say you need to have a process to develop your plan. That's how you create engagement, and you educate people around the need for change, and you equip them with the tools and the support that they need to get ready and to participate and to collaborate in that process. So this piece is really fundamental and critical. We often create plans and then they're not embedded into the bigger picture of the organization and aligned with the strategy. So that's what this whole piece is all about. The second is integration. So taking something from somewhere else that people say is a best practice and bringing it inside may not fit in your organization, but we can learn from those experiences. Those are wise practices. So how can you bring that to life and customize it in your own organization? And develop the lexicon, the materials, the tools, and the messages that you need so that people can relate and integrate it in their real work. So learning and doing is really important, and so integrating it in the way you're learning and doing and making it real is key. And then monitoring and measuring and evaluating how well you're doing, and if your plan is working, and if the activities in your plan are achieving the objectives is going to be key. So that's the action phase, looking at what you're doing as a leader, how your team is interacting with the other teams or cross-functional multidisciplinary teams, and then how are you achieving your desired results? What's emerging that's different and new, and what is really working that you planned for. And then the last phase is renewal. I changed this from sustainability and lessons learned to renewal, because it is a constant ebbing, flowing process. So you might implement one part of your solution in technology, but you're coming back with the second and the third, whatever, right? So it's always about renewing, rejuvenating, and regenerating the next level of the plan. But our world is complex, and we're working not just with our organization, we're working with partners in our communities. We're working with the public, plural, and private sectors. So we also need to look at how we're incorporating and re-energizing our plans so that we're having the desired impact we want that's beyond just the organization. It's working with the people that we're serving as well. And behind all this diagram, as you can see, is the use of self. So we're constantly needing to pay attention to how people are doing, and are they able to thrive and survive as they're leading the change initiative. So quickly, if I just ground it in our common experience of living through the pandemic, I think, you know, our public officials, our healthcare officials, everybody is aligned, speaking as one voice. We have a common goal to flatten the curve and create space in our lives so we can be healthy and we can thrive, right? So this is really, really key, and we're seeing this. They've done a great job worldwide to help us to know what the basics are. We've got a new lexicon. We all know now what COVID is. You can go online and there's new language, right? We know what physical distancing is, social connecting, all those things. So this is key. When we go now to the grocery stores, or we operate in our public parks and our communities, there's signs, symbols to tell us wear our mask, wash our hands. There's X's on the ground to tell us where we need to stand, arrows to show us. So we have visuals, we have guides. They're all grounded to help us to keep in mind and adopt these new mindsets and behaviors to protect ourselves and to protect the impacts that we make and the choices we make to follow these guidelines has a direct impact on the way we live and work with our families, our friends, our community, and you can see the direct line on the planet. We've got great images that are showing us how our actions are having a direct impact on flattening the curve. We are also seeing how our actions are not flattening the curve, and then we can adjust and make those really key changes. Unfortunately, some of them are needing to be enforced, and that is creating some difficulty in different geographic areas, but also for some people's personal use of self. And then on the renewal side, some people are looking at this now from a business perspective that it's an opportunity, so they see some changes that they can make. Other people are seeing this as a way that they need to reset the organization. And some of my clients are even seeing it's a time to re-energize our people when they go back to work, and on what our community is all about, and pull on the success and the great stories so that they want to keep the organization and community thriving. So that's the essence of the model. There's lots and lots more in the book, and there's great examples of how you can scale this from an individual theater director in a volunteer organization all the way up to the city of Ottawa, who led a major transformation and what we learned from studying them over 2.5 years.
Yeah, Bev, I really, for me, as you know, what I love about the model is the fact that it's a continuous cycle of evaluation and measuring the results. A lot of people see this as we'll do all this and then we'll measure it at the end. And certainly, as we're seeing in this day and age, you know, measurement is real time. Measurement is certainly something that, from our side of things, is something that is needed, and we want real time information. And I think as we go through this, there's also at the various stages. You see in the integration, the customized leadership development, and making sure that we are developing people for the task that is needed, as opposed to, and sometimes, you know, we what I call fire and forget training. We stick people off on a training course, forget about them, and then feel that we have checked the box. And I think, you know, that's very critical as we go through this, and making sure that it's grounded in reality, grounded in what we need to do, and in terms of the real feedback around this. I think the other point that this raises as we go through all of this, and we're seeing it a lot more, and we're seeing it that, you know, it's amazing, you know, that the decisions that government officials, and I'm privileged enough to be talking with various government officials effectively on a daily basis on various things, the decision making. And there's a short YouTube video that Michael Ryan, who is a director at the World Health Organization, has actually was talking about, that speed actually trumps precision in crisis. There's a real danger that we want to get 100% right, so therefore we don't do anything, and then we miss the chance. And sometimes it's better to get it 80% right and move forward than try to wait and wait and wait. And that requires us as change leaders to sometimes need to see around the corner a little bit. The challenge we face is, certainly in this pandemic, that corner keeps changing. But I think people are looking for leaders to try and help map out the changes. And again, that leadership can be with your own small team, if it's a small team, or with a whole organization, or quite simply with a family. And it's really, that ability to re-engage and re-energize and really start to talk about what this new world will look like. I believe that there is a danger, Bev, that we are going into what will probably be the most difficult phase of this whole pandemic, which is the next phase. And I say that because I think we're now going to get into a phase of what could be deemed by people as mixed messages. We want to open up the lockdown, but we're still unfortunately having a lot of illness and a lot of people passing away. We want to open up this group, but we're not going to open up this other group. And we're already seeing it in other countries. And this is where real ability to lead change and to follow a process is really critical. And I'm sure you've seen it, Bev, yourself as well.
I have, and I know we're going to talk about the grieving cycle in a minute, but one thing I do want to bring back, Mark, to our opening comments is I do agree it's going to be a difficult, we're coming up to a really hard spot, but not unsurmountable. I think we can do this. And I also want to really reinforce the importance of design teams, task teams, and the roles that they can play in coordinating and integrating a process that can be kept alive and keep people's fingers on the pulse, so that these plans that we're going to be developing and stuff become living plans and responsive to what is emerging, because we don't have everything all nailed down. And in most changes, not even through the pandemic, we can't forecast everything. So that's a skill, Yeah.
And again, not trying to get it 100% right, because, as I always say, the guarantee is if we try to get it 100% right, we know we'll definitely not be right. So, I think it's that ability to be able to balance on all of that. Bev, you mentioned the grieving cycle, and one of the things that you and I have talked a lot about is how that applies even within the change leadership and in leading meaningful change. I'd love to get your thoughts on why you think it's relevant, and in particularly as we go through this, where are you on the curve?
Where am I on the curve? Well, before I jump in, I do want to say that many of us have been trained in change, right? And we've seen this cycle before, but in our times right now, when you're seeing numbers every day around the souls that are passing away and the grieving that isn't, we can't honor our traditions and have the proper funerals or even bury our people. For me today, this grief side is real, and it's pervasive now across the globe. So when I look at this has layers and layers, but I have to say it's been helping me to have different kinds of conversations with the people I've been working with over the last month with that lens. So this is out of Myers-Briggs. Many of us know Myers-Briggs, and I just love this. It was designed by Nancy Barger and Linda Kirby. It's taking William Bridges' model of endings, transition, and new beginnings. If we think about this, for me, March 12th, I was in the middle of a class with a group of 40 great people from across the province here in BC, and I was told at the end of the day, we don't think we're going to be able to continue with the program. And then everything, just collapsed, right? This is when we went into lockdown and new behaviors and stuff over that week here. so there's the end of the way we were working and expectations, and then I had to live through a transition. But my God, I panicked. I mean, what am I going to do? The book launch was scheduled for April 7th, a hard date. Going to be doing this in Victoria, Ottawa, Montreal, and people all RSVP'd, and the celebration's happening. And then I got 400 books in my office going nowhere. So I panicked, and then Phil and Near was after me for years to go online, get on social media, do these kinds of things. And of course, I shied away from all that. And I quickly also, from my experience in social services, after 18 years on the front line and supporting and coaching people in social services, I saw the immediate connection to help. And I knew I wrote my book for people who really couldn't afford consultants, didn't have a lot of money, and they could actually take this as a self-help guide. And some of my clients who are long service in the mastermind group gave me feedback saying, even for them, it's great because they can validate their plans and bring back some ideas that they had forgotten about right now in this current time. So I pulled together a team like we would do normally in an organization. I pulled together my dream team, and we got it going, and we pushed to get the e-Kindle version out for low cost, so people can access it. And we started doing virtual workouts and a lot of community service all month, just so that people have some tools and they can get going. So that's from the professional side. But on the personal side, while I'm doing all this, I have days where I'm great and I'm on the building side, and then something happens. I've got my family who are working on the front lines in Quebec right now in healthcare, who are in danger. They don't have the proper equipment and they're struggling, and they're there working double shifts. I've got my dad who's in the that particular group that needs to stay home, and I'm checking in on them, and we go from feeling great to another crisis, and then feeling stable, and then another crisis. So it's managing the personal and the professional all at the same time, and that's what every leader that I've been speaking to is dealing with right now.
Yeah, and I think it's amazing, Bev, as we go through and we look at the cycle. You go back and forward even, and it's not as linear as we'd all like it to be, I'm afraid. So, and I think, for me, initially, I was one of those who was in denial that this will be something that will be a week or so. I've lived through SARS when I was in Toronto, so therefore it didn't have too big an effect in the end of the day, and it'll all work out okay. And to realize that as things start to get worse and worse, and understanding of what's happening can lead people into that sort of whole denial. And I think for me, I'm now coming around to the acceptance side of things, and to now really looking for the new beginnings and the new opportunities. And I've changed into an excitement around that. I think the challenge for us as leaders is, if I look at our organization, not everybody is in exactly the same space, and people are in very different places. I just spent this week doing some negotiations with our pilots, and they, even amongst their team, were all in different groups. And while we may look and say, how can somebody be in denial when there's so much media coverage? Well, people are just at different stages, and it doesn't mean that one of us is better than another. Just why somebody's in denial and somebody's not. So I think from our point of view, it's helping understand first of all, where we are, and understanding that we all go through this. And then secondly, helping our people and the people that work with us to go through and to get through the various stages, and to understand that, as you've said, Bev, there are good days and there are not so good days. For me, it all seems a bit like Groundhog Day. It repeats as we go through, and I think that's where we're making sure that we as leaders are getting that balance of support, of coaching for us as well. We all need that. and making sure that there are the single sources of truth. One of the challenges I believe leaders face in this day and age is not that there is the lack of information. It's the fact that we actually get far too much information, and the people that are able to weed out the information that is nice to have but pretty irrelevant, and the people that are able to take that information and use the right information at the right times. And that's the skill that many of us weren't taught that at school, but as part of change leadership and through various approaches, we learn that, and we learn those skills to be able to do that. And that's where we can make the right decisions.
I agree.
Just on that, and as we've talked about these unprecedented times, Bev, I actually read a recent Morneau Chappelle survey that said 98% of Canadians were either partially or completely affected by this pandemic. I'm just looking to find who the 2% are that haven't been, but it seems that we're all affected in some way or form of that. I'd love to just understand from your side of things, Bev, what help or advice you'd give to us, as that is useful from both the book and from your experience as we go through this.
Right. It's a good question. One thing that's not in the book that has been helping me and helping other leaders, and that I learned from one of my clients, Carl Anthony in the Ministry of Finance, shared this with us in one of the virtual groups. It's the acronym of CARE. And it is so important, like in the aerospace world, airline business, we have to put our own mask on before we can help others. So we have to care for ourselves, and then, we have to seek out and care for our teams and our families and the people in our communities. So CARE stands for communicate, and we need as leaders to reach out and see how our teams are doing. We need to check with our families to see how they're doing. So communicating outward, but it's also communicating what we also need through this process. Everybody is going through this. So even as a leader, we need to express what we need through the process. And communicate the facts, that's important. Communicate the process, the background, and the facts of what we're doing and why we're leading in this way. Adapt. We need to adapt. The longer we take to adapt, then the more stress, the more anxiety we might have, and the more tension we might even create in our organizations and families. So adapting is key, and having the supports to help people adapt and help ourselves adapt is key. Keeping a routine. I know we hear this all the time, but try to get a routine going in your day so it gets you out of bed, it keeps you motivated. Routine is one of the biggest challenges that I'm hearing people talk about when they're working from home right now, because people are sharing computers, they're sharing, rooms in their house that they have to manage between the children going to school and spouses working from home. But working out that routine is key, because then where you have your private time, where you have your work time, you can have some boundaries. And exercise. Exercise is key, and it's not just physical, it's mental health. Take some breaks. I do some coloring and I go for my walks. That's my exercise. But also exercise by putting into practice these ideas and principles. That's really, really important, So in the book, though, there's great exercises, and there's one that's helped me tremendously. It's the reframing exercise, and it keeps coming back. Everybody, it's like a boomerang. It comes back all the time. And as how this works, and it's a fantastic skill. I was on my walk and totally frustrated in the beginning of the COVID when we had to keep the physical distancing. I was hopping off the street onto people's lawns and zigzagging, in the neighborhood. And I got frustrated, and there's this one lady on the corner who was waiting for me to pass, and she gave me a nod and smiled. And then she said, "This is a dance." And I just thought, oh my God, it's the COVID dance. So then I just had a different reframe on the experience. And then I started playing with it. And I said to people, hey, I see you're frustrated, but it's the COVID dance. I said, pass it on. And now in the neighborhood, people are saying it's the COVID death. So if you can find ways to have some humor with it, play with it, and reframe the experience, not to eliminate what's happening, but to help you to get through it, I think is key. And there's an excellent.
And I would agree with you, Bev. And there's, it's a terrible pandemic, and we know, and many of us have had family members or who know of colleagues who've had family members who have been affected by this pandemic. But I completely agree with yourself around the use of humor, and not to be afraid to do that and have a little bit of a laugh around that. And for us, I mean, one of the things I've set up with my team, and it's been with both the people that we have had to put on layoff and the people that are still here, is we have a little WhatsApp group, and we use that to share different funny things, different interesting things, and even just different motivational, videos that come through that we can just share. And before all of this happened, I never even heard of TikTok. So now we're all we're now all experts in inverted commas at that. But having that, being able to share. And I think we've developed it's funny, we've got to know people in using social media even more so than we have sometimes when we come to an office or come to a workplace and we have to put on our office hats or corporate hats. We're now seeing people in their in their workout clothes or in their hoodies, or and we see their kids as well. I love it in our case when we have our all leader webinars, and we're all up on the screen, and you see somebody sitting there with their child on their knee or something like that. And the kids can bring some great humor to us as well. One of my colleagues the other day,
as well as the pets.
Yeah. Well, certainly in our case, definitely the pets as well. One of my colleagues the other day, we were doing a webinar with a group, and his 6-year-old daughter came in, and at the top of her voice, with all of us hearing, said, "Daddy, why are you not wearing any pants?" And he was actually in his gym gear, his shorts, which he had to stand up and tell everyone, but certainly created a bit of humor around that. And I think it's just helping us understand where people are at each case. And I think it's about making the effort for all of us as people go through that, and just keeping an eye out for each other. And it can be as simple as a little text. It can be a video that you're sending to someone, or even it can be just sharing of a song that is important. And I think that helps us as we all go through this pandemic. Bev, maybe what I'll do is just stop there, because I can see coming through lots of questions through to Phil. So Phil, I'm going to hand over to you to ask Bev the difficult questions, and hopefully me the easy ones. So we'll do it that way around. So over to you, Phil.
Sure. Thank you very much, guys. So we do have a question from Ajit, and Ajit asks, could you please elaborate on the resignation phase of the curve? That's the grieving cycle.
Resignation. Okay.
Yeah, let me just put that up for you guys again. It's right there. There you go.
Well, my take on resignation is it's like, okay, I'm going to stop fighting this, and I'm going to go through this. And if I tie it to the use of self, this is where I have a choice on how I'm going to show up, even though I'm resigning to the fact that I am in lockdown. I can't get on. I can't go on my holiday. I'm going to be stuck here. How can I make the best of it? That's what I would do if I was in resignation and trying to be my best self. How about you, Mark? What do you think?
I think, and sometimes it can be hard to distinguish the different phases, and sometimes resignation can be, we can sometimes mistake that for either depression or in some cases even panic as we go through the phases. I think we first of all, and I know we've said it on a couple of occasions, but I think it's important enough to repeat, we all go through the various stages, and to understand that people will go through that, and that's okay. And in some cases, people get through it within a matter of hours, and some it's a little bit more. And part of it is, and we talked about humor there earlier, it's not about trying to jolly people out of this. It's about helping people understand what is happening. And one of the things that I think it's quite interesting, certainly for me, I got, in the early stages of this, got addicted to the news broadcasts. And I think I would watch, whether it's CBC, BBC, Global, all of them saying roughly the same thing, by the way. But and then I realized that I got to pick and just restrict myself to, I'm going to hear from a single source or one or two sources, and use that to understand what's happening, and then help communicate with people, first of all, what really is happening. And then the second bit is how they move forward and how we can actually have the new world and what that will look like. I know it's become a bit of a trite phrase, this will pass, and I think we all realize that that it will, but I think it's really important that we help people, we're with them, we're supportive, and as we go through that resignation phase, the understanding that people will grieve the loss. And Bev, as you said, it's whether it's grieving the loss of a vacation or whether it's grieving the loss of an event that they really wanted to go and see. I think that's critical,
Right.
as we go through all of this. And again, it's going to be different for every person.
Yeah.
If I could, another question we have, this is from Alyssa, whom I know, and she works in the area of home care for seniors. And she asks, can you talk about resiliency in the context of this model and leadership throughout this crisis? Resiliency is critical, but if unchecked, can get in the way of self-care. Not all heroes wear capes, but even superheroes need a rest and care. This can be particularly hard for superheroes, translation, health workers, and leaders in the health crisis.
Yeah, this is a really great question, and yeah, and we need to do this. Back to what we were talking about in terms of use of self and choices, and it involves also showing vulnerability and the need to take care of yourself. We can get mentally exhausted, and you know, we need to also take care of ourselves. So I think you need to build in the routine. That CARE acronym is really important. You need to communicate to the people you're working with when you need a break, why you know, take the time. I know there's a shortage, but if we burn everybody out, we won't have the staff to take care of people. So we do need to work that. There's some good structural and organizational pieces in place that are trying to help people to be resilient. There's lots of mental health support that people can access for free. There's lots. If you go to your government or municipal websites, people are posting those kinds of resources. Working together with your teammates and putting in place routines to help you to debrief, talk about your experience, and recharge is also really key, especially when you're working in teams on the front line. Educating your leaders, they don't have all the answers, so you have to also communicate upwards and across. And putting in place regular checkpoints, I think, is really important to have those conversations. So you know, when I worked with public health, it was like doctors doing their rounds. We had our rounds to check in with each other, and it didn't have to be an hour-long session. It could be a 10-15-minute check-in, just so everybody knows if there's something really important, you need to address it, but you're there right away, you know, to see and hear how people are thinking and feeling. I think that's key. Monitoring and measuring your experience is also important. You know, in some teams, you know, we did really quick pulse surveys, and then we tracked how well we were doing, you know. So I think that's really important. Self-care.
Yeah, and Bev, just to build on that, I think for me, if you're a leader in any of, you know, in any shape or form during this pandemic, we have to model the way forward. We have to model that is the first thing. And that means us taking time, us saying, I'm not going to be at that event. We do have, and we see it even in our industry, where we have people who almost get into this panic of, I gotta be at work, I gotta be there, I gotta help, I'm a leader, I gotta be there. And again, this is where our board of directors or even our own leaders can help by saying, actually, no, I want you to take time off. This is a marathon, not a sprint.
Yeah.
We are now seeing, my sister happens to be a nurse in an elder care facility in Ireland, and I saw it last weekend with her, and the people are getting tired, and we need to help make sure that, Bev, you mentioned the care analogy, and I think it's very, very important that people, that we sometimes have to help, whether it's our friends, whether it's our relations, or even leaders, to say, take some time to do this, and quite simply to check in with people, and not check in as a a platitude, but to develop that relationship that says, hey, noticed you're looking tired on that. Why don't you take tomorrow or the other afternoon off? Let me cover for you, or whatever.
Yeah.
And I get it, in many areas it's much easier said than done. I completely understand, but my fear,
Yeah. Underneath it all is leaders need to develop the skill and be empathetic. Walk in the shoes of the people they're leading to truly understand what the day in the life is right now, and then try to help. I think that's the first step and the key. Yeah,
absolutely. And getting rest is so important in all of this, and being able to do that. And again, I appreciate easier said than done, but getting that routine, getting that rest, and having that check-in, and doing something different. I mean, Bev, you mentioned going out for a walk is as good as a rest sometimes for people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a good segue for perhaps our last question. Is Luke St. Arnaud asks, we say that leaders need to be more compassionate with employees. Do you have best practice examples on how companies encourage compassionate behaviors?
This is a good question, because we know we have leaders that are drivers, and they're all about results. But the subtitle in my book is Capturing the Hearts, Minds, and Souls of the People You Lead, Work With, and Serve. Underneath all that is compassion and tips. Do a day in the life, get out there, talk to people. When you have a real human connection and an appreciation for what people are doing, I think then you can show up and be compassionate and be authentic, and not stay in the ivory tower and just drive numbers and data. I think that's key.
Yeah, Bev, I would completely agree. I think one of the challenges, I think, certainly in Western organizations that I've seen over the years, is we look on compassion as not being strong leadership. And for me, compassion is absolutely the strongest leadership. It doesn't mean that you can't give people real feedback. It doesn't mean that you can't make difficult decisions. I have found that you can have some of the hardest decisions, and as long as it's done in a compassionate and in a caring way. And the key piece of compassion for me is the authenticity of that. It can't be put on, it can't be written down. It's about being authentic. And the way to help leaders is to give them feedback. And that can be tough and can be challenging, but to help people by providing that feedback. We can give a lot of people the tools to do that, but we also need to help them with not just the what, but also the how things can come across. And certainly when you look at different personalities, whether it's through Myers-Briggs or any other DISC or any other approach, it's just helping people understand, that being authentic is actually the key part, as opposed to just hey, I checked a box because I asked you, how are you doing? And I think that's our challenge as we're in this way, and to try and play to people's strengths. I have a leader in our organization who is phenomenal with the written word, is actually not so good when he speaks to people. And it's sort of, well, play to your strength, write it down. And that's a key part in our help and support as practitioners with our leaders, is to support them in how they can do that in a way that makes sense, and put those support mechanisms in place.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Mark and Bev, where time is up, and I'd like to thank you both very much for this wonderful conversation. Do you have some final words to share? And in the meantime, I will also share the slide on the resources that we'll be sending to everybody shortly after this fireside chat.
Okay, great. Well, I want to thank you, Phil, for this invitation to be with our community of coaching ourselves and beyond, because I know there's a lot of other people on the call with us today. I know we're in unprecedented times, and we're coming up to leading through a difficult phase. I just hope everybody stays safe and healthy, and let's get through this. We're in it all together.
And for me, I just want to thank everybody on this. It's, these are challenging times, and again, use whether it's this or other sessions to help pump your own tires up as well. It can be learning. It can help with each of us and help understand where everyone else is. Stay close to your community, and that's a community of practice. Make sure that you're touching base with others that are working with this. And I'll finish with a plug that I have no reservations in saying, if there's one book on leading change that you read this year, read Bev's book, because I have to say, it's not the sort of book you read cover to cover. It's the one that you delve in and out of, and I'm no doubt that there's a lot of information, certainly I've found, that have been very helpful as I help an organization like WestJet navigate through these very unprecedented times.
Excellent.
Thanks, Mark.
Yes. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Bev. And thank you, everybody who gave us your time today to come and listen to Bev and Mark for the last hour. I wish you all the best. Have a great weekend as best as possible at home, and enjoy yourselves with the book. Thank you very much, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks.